I died on the coldest night of January, though the servants still bring tea to my bedchamber, and my husband, the Duke, speaks of my illness as something from which I might recover. The truth is far more terrible. I exist in a realm between life and death, watching my own body waste away while my spirit wanders the halls of Blackmoore Manor each night, unseen by all except, sometimes, by him. The first time the Duke saw me was 3 weeks after my supposed confinement. I had learned by then how to manifest more strongly in the midnight hours. The grandfather clock in the hall had just struck 12, and I stood on his balcony, my black dress billowing though there was no wind. Through the glass doors, I could see him at his desk, hunched over papers that I now know contained formulas and incantations, the very same that had reduced me to my current state. I remember that night, how the snow fell around Blackmoore Manor, how the branches of the ancient oak trees scratched against the windows like skeletal fingers, how different my life had been just months before, when I first arrived as the Duke's bride. I was Charlotte Winters then, the daughter of a respected but financially ruined physician. My father's research on the boundaries between life and death had caught the attention of the Duke of Blackmoore, a man known for his brilliant mind and equally formidable fortune. "You will be comfortable with him, Charlotte?" my father had assured me, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "The Duke shares my scientific interests, and your marriage will secure our family's position." I had nodded dutifully, understanding what was left unspoken. My father was dying, his consumption worsening with each passing day, and without the Duke's patronage, both his life's work and his actual life would soon end. The Duke was not what I expected. Tall and severe, with eyes the color of a winter sea, he was younger than the typical aristocrats who sought brides among the desperate gentry. 35 to my 22, he spoke little during our brief courtship, but when he did, it was with precision and intelligence that made me believe I might find, if not love, at least intellectual companionship in our union. Our wedding was a quiet affair at Blackmoore's chapel, with only my father and the Duke's sister, Lady Eleanor, in attendance. The Duke had pressed his cold lips against mine, a perfunctory gesture that sealed our contract. That night, he had come to my chamber, performed his marital duties with detached efficiency, and left before dawn. This pattern continued for weeks, brief, emotionless encounters that left me feeling more like a scientific specimen than a wife. I discovered the laboratory quite by accident. It was hidden behind the library, accessible through a mechanism disguised as an ornate bookshelf. I had been searching for something to read during the long, lonely days when the Duke was absent from Blackmoore, engaged in what he called business in London. My fingers had brushed against a volume of Paracelsus, and suddenly the shelf had swung open, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Curiosity overcame propriety, and I followed the stairs down to a cavernous room filled with equipment I recognized from my father's work, but far more elaborate and strange. Glass containers held specimens I dared not examine too closely. A large table dominated the center, fitted with leather restraints. Journals filled with my husband's precise handwriting covered a desk, detailing experiments on the preservation of life essence and reanimation of vital spirits. I should have left immediately, reported what I'd found to someone, though who would believe accusations against the Duke of Blackmoore? Instead, I committed the most grievous error. I read further, discovering that my husband had been corresponding with my father for years, that my father had shared his research freely, believing the Duke intended to help him find a cure for his consumption, that the Duke had pursued our marriage not out of any interest in me, but because he believed the daughter of such a researcher might carry some inherent receptivity to his experiments. I was still reading, horror mounting with each page, when I heard his voice behind me. "I see you've discovered my life's work, Duchess." His tone was calm, as if he'd found me reading poetry in the garden rather than uncovering his macabre research. I turned slowly, clutching one of his journals to my chest. "What is all this? What have you been doing?" "The greatest work of all, conquering death itself." He approached me steadily, no emotion visible in those pale eyes. "Your father came close with his theories, but he lacked the courage to take the necessary steps. I do not. My father would never condone this. These restraints, these specimens. This is monstrous. Your father is dead, Charlotte." He delivered this news without preamble or sympathy. The telegram arrived this morning. His consumption finally claimed him. The journal slipped from my hands. My father, gone. My last protection in this world, severed. I remember sinking to my knees, tears blurring my vision. But his work need not die with him, the Duke continued, kneeling beside me, his voice taking on an unsettling eagerness. You and I, Charlotte, we can achieve what he could not. You carry his blood, his intellect. Together, we can transcend the limitations of mortality. When I looked up, I saw something I had never witnessed in my husband's face before. Passion, genuine fervor that transformed his features from cold marble to something almost human. In that moment, I realized with absolute clarity that I was in the presence of madness. I will not help you with this, I whispered. This must stop. His expression hardened, the momentary animation fading. I had hoped for your willing participation, but it is not strictly necessary. As my wife, you are legally under my protection and control. No one will question what happens within these walls. I tried to flee, but he caught me easily, pressing a cloth to my face. The sickly sweet smell of chloroform filled my nostrils, and darkness claimed me. I awoke strapped to the central table, my husband moving methodically around me, preparing instruments and mixtures. I begged, I pleaded, I threatened, I wept. He acknowledged none of it, his focus absolute as he described what he was about to do in the same detached tone he might use to explain a mathematical theorem. The separation of soul and body need not be permanent, he explained, filling a syringe with luminescent blue fluid. With the right catalyst, the essence can remain tethered, neither fully alive nor truly dead. A perfect subject for further study. The needle pierced my skin, and fire spread through my veins. I screamed until my throat was raw, but the servants had been dismissed for the night, and Blackmoore Manor kept its secrets well. I felt it happen, the moment when something fundamental within me fractured. My consciousness seemed to float above my body, watching as the Duke meticulously recorded my vital signs, my responses, the dilation of my pupils. I saw my own lips turn blue, heard the rattle in my chest as my breathing slowed, then stopped. Remarkable, the Duke murmured, making another note. Subject appears deceased by conventional standards, yet the essence remains observable. I wanted to rage, to strike him, but I had no physical form with which to act. I could only watch as he covered my body with a sheet and called for the servants, informing them with perfect, practiced grief that the Duchess had succumbed to a sudden fever. The following days were a blur of confusion and despair. I watched my own funeral preparations, the servants moving somberly through the house, the local doctor signing my death certificate without question. Who would dare suggest the Duke of Blackmoore might have had a hand in his wife's demise? Yet there was no actual funeral. The Duke announced that due to the contagious nature of my illness, I would be interred in the family mausoleum without ceremony. In reality, he moved my body to a hidden room adjacent to his laboratory, where I discovered my true situation was even more horrifying than I had imagined. I was not dead. Not completely. My body still drew shallow breaths, my heart beat weakly, perhaps once per minute. The Duke had achieved his goal. I existed in a state between life and death, my spirit capable of wandering the manor while my physical form remained in a death-like trance. It took me days to learn how to control my new existence. At first, I was little more than a wisp of consciousness, unable to interact with the physical world. But gradually, I discovered that during the deepest hours of night, particularly when the moon was full, I could gather enough substance to move small objects, to be visible to those with the sensitivity to see beyond the veil of ordinary reality. The Duke, immersed in occult knowledge as well as science, possessed such sensitivity. The first time he saw me, standing on his balcony in the black dress they had prepared for my burial, he dropped the brandy glass he was holding. The sound of shattering crystal was intensely satisfying to my wounded spirit. "Charlotte," he whispered, approaching the glass doors cautiously. I could not yet speak, could only stare at him with all the accusation and betrayal I felt. When he reached for the door handle, I dissipated, unable to maintain my form in the face of such emotion. Night after night I returned, growing stronger each time. The servants began to whisper about a lady in black who haunted the Duke's balcony. Some claimed she was a former lover, others a victim of some past crime. None suspected it was the supposedly ailing Duchess, whom they believed lay invalid in a rarely visited wing of the manor. The Duke became obsessed with these visitations. I would watch him from the shadows during the day, see him consulting ancient texts, scribbling theories about ghosts and apparitions. He did not connect these nocturnal hauntings with his experiment, believing instead that he had somehow attracted a genuine spirit through his work with the boundary between life and death. I learned that he had told the household I was not dead, but suffering from a wasting illness that required complete isolation. Only he and a trusted nurse, actually his laboratory assistant, were permitted to attend me. This fiction allowed him to continue his experiments on my dormant body while searching for the spectral lady in black. As the weeks passed, I discovered something unexpected. When I returned to my body after my nightly wanderings, I could sometimes make my physical lips move, my fingers twitch. The connection between my spirit and flesh was not entirely severed. It was repairing itself, fighting against the Duke's chemical separation. On the night that changed everything, the Duke had left his laboratory briefly to retrieve a text from the library. I seized this rare opportunity when my body was unattended, forcing my spirit back into my flesh with all the will I could muster. For a few precious minutes, I regained enough control to examine the formula the Duke had used on me, hastily memorizing key components. I understood then that my father's research, which the Duke had corrupted, contained not only the means to separate body and soul, but potentially to restore them. If I could communicate this to someone, if I could make the Duke understand what he had done and how to reverse it, I might be saved. But who would help the ghost of a woman presumed ill by her powerful husband? I needed the Duke himself to recognize me, to acknowledge his crime, to make amends. And for that, I would need to become more than a fleeting vision on his balcony. Tonight, as the grandfather clock strikes midnight and the full moon rises above Blackmoore Manor, I will attempt something I have never tried before. I will speak. I will force words through the veil that separates my existence from his. I will make him see that the lady in black who appears on his balcony every night is his own wife, trapped between worlds by his hand, and perhaps, though I scarcely dare hope, still capable of stirring whatever remnant of humanity might lurk within his heart. I remember when I first met Edward Blackmoore, before he became my husband, before I knew him as the Duke with cold eyes and colder ambitions. It was at a scientific lecture in London, where my father was presenting his theories on electrical impulses in organic matter. I sat in the back, as was proper for a young lady attending such an academic gathering, my gray dress blending into the shadows. I noted the tall man who asked the most penetrating questions, how the room seemed to hold its breath when he spoke. I did not yet know that breath would one day be a luxury beyond my reach. These memories flood back to me as I stand on his balcony tonight, gathering the strength to speak. The moon is full, casting silver light across the grounds of Blackmoore Manor. I can see my reflection in the glass doors, a translucent figure in black, my face pale as bone, my eyes hollowed by suffering. I am both more and less than I once was. Inside, the Duke paces. He has been waiting for me, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk, his hair disheveled from running his fingers through it repeatedly. The clock strikes midnight, and I feel the surge of power that comes with the hour. I press my palm against the glass, leaving a frosted handprint that slowly crystallizes into delicate patterns of ice. The Duke approaches cautiously, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his unease. He reaches for the door handle, and this time, I do not disappear. As he slides the door open, cold air rushes into the warm room, extinguishing the fire in the grate and causing the papers on his desk to scatter like frightened birds. "Who are you?" he whispers, his breath visible in the sudden chill. "Why do you haunt me?" I summon all my strength, focusing on making my vocal cords vibrate in this ephemeral form. "You know who I am, Edward." My voice emerges as a whisper, like wind through dead leaves. "Look at me. Really look." He steps closer, studying my face with the intensity he once reserved for his specimens. I see the moment recognition dawns. His eyes widen, color drains from his face. "Charlotte? Impossible. You're in your sickbed. This is some trick, some manifestation of guilt, perhaps. He is talking to himself now, the scientist attempting to rationalize the supernatural. Not a trick, I say, my form flickering with the effort of speech. An experiment. Your experiment. You separated my soul from my body, and now I exist in both states and neither. The lady in black who appears on your balcony is your own wife, Edward. He stumbles backward, colliding with his desk. No, the formula was designed to preserve life, to transcend death, not to create this. Yet here I am, neither alive nor dead. Do you still record your observations in your journal, husband? What notes will you make tonight? The bitterness in my voice causes the glass in the windows to vibrate. Edward reaches for me, his hand passing through my arm with a sensation like plunging into ice water. He gasps, pulling back. You're real. Or at least, some aspect of you is. Take me to my body, I demand. I want to see what remains of me. His scientific curiosity seems to override his shock. Yes, of course. This is unprecedented. The implications. He is already thinking of how to document this phenomenon, how to replicate it. My husband, ever the researcher. We move through the silent manor, Edward leading the way with a candelabra, though I need no light to navigate the darkness. Servants sleeping behind closed doors have no idea that their master walks the halls with a ghost. We descend the hidden staircase behind the library, the flames casting grotesque shadows on the stone walls. The laboratory is as I remember it, a temple to Edward's obsession with conquering mortality. New equipment has been added. Journals filled with observations of my condition stack the desk. But my focus is entirely on the figure lying on a bed in an adjacent chamber, visible through a glass partition. My body. I approach the glass, placing my spectral hand against it. The woman on the bed barely resembles the Charlotte who came to Blackmoore as a bride. Her skin is alabaster pale, her cheeks sunken, her once golden hair now white as snow and spread across the pillow like winter frost. Yet her chest rises and falls with shallow breaths, perhaps 4 or 5 per hour. Tubes and wires connect her to Edward's machinery, measuring and sustaining what little life remains. You've been continuing your experiments, I say, turning to face him. Edward has the decency to look somewhat ashamed. I've been trying to understand what happened. Your condition is unique, Charlotte. The separation was more complete than I anticipated, yet the connection remains. It's fascinating from a scientific... Fascinating? My rage causes the glass partition to crack, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. I am not one of your specimens, Edward. I was your wife. You still are, he says quietly, legally and otherwise. A wife you murdered for your research. No, not murdered. He sets down the candelabra, approaching me with hands outstretched in a placating gesture. You're still alive, Charlotte. Your body functions. Your mind clearly remains intact, albeit in this unusual form. I never intended to cause you harm. What did you intend then, when you strapped me to your table and injected me with your formula? He hesitates, and I see conflict in his eyes. I intended to achieve what your father and I had worked toward for years, a means of preserving consciousness beyond bodily death. Your father's consumption was advancing rapidly. We were running out of time. My father would never have experimented on an unwilling subject, on his own daughter. You're right. Edward's admission surprises me. When I told him of my plans to attempt the procedure on a human subject, he objected strenuously. It was our final disagreement before his death. I feel a vindication in this knowledge, that my father had maintained his ethical boundaries even as death approached. Then why did you proceed? Why me? Edward turns away, moving to check the equipment monitoring my physical form. It is a convenient excuse to avoid my gaze. The formula required genetic compatibility with the researcher to maximize chances of success. Your father was no longer an option. As his daughter, you shared his unique neurological attributes that made separation of consciousness possible. So you married me to experiment on me. The temperature in the room drops further, my anger manifesting physically. No, at least not initially. He runs a hand through his hair in frustration. I married you because your father asked me to care for you after his death. The idea to use you as a subject came later, after I discovered certain anomalies in your brain patterns while you slept. You watched me sleep? I monitored you, scientifically. His defense sounds weak even to his own ears, I can tell. Charlotte, you must understand. What we've achieved is revolutionary. No human has ever existed as you do now, conscious in two states simultaneously. What we've achieved, I repeat incredulously. I did not consent to this achievement, Edward. You stole my life, but I can restore it. His words freeze me in place. At least, I believe I can. The formula that separated your consciousness can be reversed. I've been working on it since I realized what had truly happened to you. Hope flutters in what remains of my heart. You can restore me? Reunite my spirit with my body completely? Theoretically, yes, but it's dangerous. The shock of full reintegration could kill you entirely. Your body has been in this state for months now. There would be a significant adjustment period and no guarantee of success. I drift closer to the glass partition, studying my withered physical form. And if we do nothing, what becomes of me then? Edward's silence is answer enough. I turn to face him, noticing for the first time how exhausted he appears. Dark circles shadow his eyes, and his clothes hang more loosely than I remember. Has my haunting affected him so deeply? The connection between your spirit and body is weakening, he finally admits. Each night you manifest more strongly in this form, but your physical form grows weaker. Eventually, the connection will sever completely. And then? I don't know. Perhaps you would become a true ghost, untethered from your body. Perhaps you would simply cease. His clinical tone cannot mask the concern in his eyes. Is it concern for his experiment or for me? I cannot tell. How long? At the current rate of deterioration? 3 weeks, perhaps a month. 1 month. 1 month to decide whether to risk everything on Edward's untested reversal procedure or to fade away into whatever awaits on the other side of existence. 1 month to determine if the man who destroyed my life deserves the chance to save it. Why did you do it, Edward? Not the scientific reason, the true reason. What drives a man to such extremes? I need to understand him if I am to trust him with my salvation. He sits heavily in a chair near my body's bed, suddenly looking every year of his age and more. Fear, he admits quietly. My mother died when I was young, much like yours did. My father followed soon after from what the doctors called a weakened heart, but what I knew to be grief. Death has stalked my family for generations. The Blackmoores are prone to early demise. A family curse, some say. This is more personal revelation than he has shared in all our months of marriage. I remain silent, encouraging him to continue. I was determined to break the pattern, to master death before it mastered me. He looks up at me, his eyes haunted. Your father's research offered the first real hope. When he fell ill, I promised him I would continue our work, that I would protect you. This is how you protected me? I gesture to my vacant body. I never claimed to be a good man, Charlotte, only a determined one. He stands abruptly, moving to a cabinet, where he withdraws a leather-bound journal I've never seen before. Your father's final notes. He theorized that the separation process could be reversed using the same principles in mirror. A perfect symmetry of chemical and electrical stimulation. I drift closer, peering at the familiar handwriting. My father's last gift to the world, and, potentially, to me. Will you help me, Charlotte? Help me correct my gravest error? Edward asks, a vulnerability in his voice I've never heard before. Together, we might succeed where I would fail alone. I study him carefully, this man who is both my destroyer and possibly my salvation. Why would you restore me? Once I am whole again, what would prevent me from exposing what you've done? Nothing. His answer is simple and unexpected. You would be within your rights to ruin me. But I would accept that fate if it meant undoing the harm I've caused. I cannot tell if he is sincere or manipulating me yet again. The Edward Blackmoore I married was a master of saying what needed to be said to achieve his ends. Yet there is something different in his manner now. A desperation that seems genuine, a regret that cannot be entirely feigned. I will consider it, I say finally, but I need proof of your sincerity. Name it. Stop treating my body as an experiment. Remove the excessive monitoring equipment. Move me, from this laboratory to my proper bedchamber. Care for me as a husband should care for an ailing wife, not as a scientist observes a specimen. He hesitates only briefly before nodding. It shall be done tomorrow, and I want access to all your research and my father's. If we are to attempt this reversal, I will understand every aspect of it. No more secrets between us, Edward. This request clearly makes him more uncomfortable, but again he agrees. You have a right to know. Dawn approaches. I can feel my spiritual form weakening as the night's power fades. Soon I will be drawn back into my physical body, dormant until the following night. I must go, I whisper, already becoming more translucent. Edward reaches for me, his hand passing through mine with that same icy sensation. Will you return tomorrow night? Where else would I go? A trace of bitter humor colors my fading voice. I am bound to this place, to you, to that body. We are entangled, you and I, in life and in this half-death. As consciousness slips away from my spectral form, I see something unexpected in Edward's eyes, not scientific curiosity or the cold calculation I've grown accustomed to, but something warmer, more human. Is it guilt, compassion, or something deeper that I dare not name? My last thought before darkness claims me is a troubling one. After all the Duke has done, why does some treacherous part of my heart still respond to that warmth in his gaze? What does it say about me that even now, between life and death, I cannot fully extinguish whatever drew me to him in the first place? The next night, I awake to find everything changed. My body has been moved to my bedchamber as promised, arranged with dignity upon my four-poster bed. The medical equipment has been reduced to the minimum necessary to sustain my physical form. Fresh flowers scent the air. White roses, which Edward could not have known were my favorites before our marriage. And beside the bed, slumped in a chair with his head resting near my physical hand, is the Duke himself. He has fallen asleep while reading my father's journal, his fingers just inches from my body's pale hand. In sleep, the hard lines of his face soften, and I'm reminded of how young he truly is beneath the weight of his title and obsessions. I drift closer, studying this tableau of the living and the half-dead. For the first time since my transformation, I feel something besides rage and fear, a complicated emotion I cannot name. My spectral hand hovers over Edward's sleeping head, unable to touch yet unwilling to withdraw. This is the man who destroyed me. This is also the man who might save me. And as the moonlight streams through the windows of Blackmoore Manor, illuminating us both in its silver glow, I wonder if redemption is possible for either of us. Night after night, Edward and I work together in my bedchamber, poring over my father's journals and Edward's own notes. During the day, while I am trapped in my dormant body, Edward conducts careful experiments, testing theories and refining formulas. Each evening when I manifest, he reports his findings, and I offer insights my father had shared with me during my childhood. Seemingly insignificant comments that now take on new meaning. It is a strange collaboration. The Duke of Blackmoore and his spectral Duchess trying to undo what should never have been done. The servants whisper that their master has gone mad with grief, talking to himself for hours in the supposedly invalid Duchess's room. If they only knew the truth. Your father believed that consciousness exists in a wave-like state, Edward explains one night, sketching diagrams on paper as I hover near my own bedside. Matter and energy interconverting. What my formula did was force a phase shift, causing your consciousness to manifest primarily as energy rather than remaining bound to matter. Like light behaving as both particle and wave, I suggest, recalling one of my father's favorite analogies. Edward looks up sharply, surprise and admiration briefly illuminating his features. Precisely. You understand the principles far better than I expected. I am my father's daughter, I remind him. He educated me despite society's disapproval. I may not have his genius, but I am not ignorant of his work. Nor mine, it seems. Edward gestures to the notes I had been studying. You've identified 3 errors in my calculations already. Errors that might have killed me permanently had we proceeded without correction. His expression sobers. Yes, I have been less careful than I should have been. This is as close to an apology as the Duke of Blackmoore seems capable of offering. In these past weeks, I have learned that Edward's emotional vocabulary is severely limited. Raised by distant relatives after his parents' deaths, educated in the coldest traditions of scientific rationalism, he seems to experience feelings as foreign intrusions to be analyzed rather than experienced. Yet occasionally, I glimpse something more beneath the surface, a capacity for passion that has been ruthlessly suppressed. It emerges most clearly when he speaks of our progress. The reversal formula is nearly complete, he tells me, a rare excitement animating his voice. We need only to calibrate the electrical component. Your father theorized that the return of consciousness to body would require a precisely timed electrical charge, mimicking the brain's natural pulses, but amplified. I drift to the window, watching snow begin to fall outside. Winter has deepened around Blackmoore Manor, matching the frozen state of my existence. How much time remains before the connection severs completely? Edward checks his pocket watch, a nervous habit he has developed during our nightly sessions. 2 weeks, perhaps less. Your physical form has stabilized somewhat since we moved you here, but the deterioration continues. 2 weeks to live, or to die completely. The choice weighs heavily upon me. And the risks of the procedure? Substantial, he admits, setting aside his papers and approaching where I hover by the window. The shock could destroy your consciousness entirely, or your body might reject the reintegration, resulting in immediate physical death. So I could lose everything instead of only half my existence. Yes, his honesty is one improvement in our relationship. The Duke no longer attempts to shield me from unpleasant truths or manipulate me with half-statements. Perhaps he has learned that I am beyond the reach of conventional deception. There is something we haven't discussed, Edward. I turn to face him, moonlight passing through my translucent form to cast strange patterns on the floorboards. What happens afterward if we succeed? What kind of life would I return to? He seems genuinely puzzled by the question. You would return to your position as Duchess, of course. Your miraculous recovery would be the talk of London society. And us? What would become of our marriage? Edward's expression closes like a book being shut. That would be for you to determine. As I said before, you would be within your rights to expose what I've done, to seek an annulment or separation. And if I didn't? If I chose to remain as your wife, what then? Would we continue as before? You in your laboratory, me in my isolated wing of the manor? Strangers sharing nothing but a name and a roof? I had not considered. He falters, seemingly at a loss. What would you want, Charlotte? The question catches me off guard. In all our marriage, Edward has never asked what I wanted. My desires, my hopes, my dreams were irrelevant to the arrangement our fathers had constructed. That he asks now, when I am half a ghost, strikes me as bitterly ironic. I wanted what any woman wants in marriage, I say softly. Respect, companionship, perhaps, eventually, affection. Affection. He repeats the word as if it is in a foreign language he is attempting to pronounce correctly. I am not certain I know how to provide that. You never tried, Edward? He flinches as if I had struck him. No, I did not. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes midnight, marking the witching hour when my spectral form is strongest. I use this power to move closer to him, close enough that if I were solid, we would be sharing breath. Why did you marry me, Edward? The complete truth this time, not the convenient explanation or the scientific rationale. Why me? He turns away, pacing the length of the room before stopping at my bedside, looking down at my physical form with an unreadable expression. I told myself it was for the research, for the genetic compatibility you shared with your father. His voice is low, almost a whisper. But there was more. The first time I saw you at your father's lecture, sitting quietly in the back row, you were different from the other women I had encountered. You listened. You understood. I saw your eyes light with comprehension when your father explained his most complex theories. This admission startles me. I had no idea he had even noticed me before our formal introduction. Later, when I spoke with your father about his work, he would mention things you had said or suggested, small insights that had helped him overcome obstacles in his research. He was immensely proud of you, not as a daughter to be married off, but as a mind to be nurtured. Edward's hand hovers over my body's white hair, not quite touching. I thought perhaps you might understand me as well, that in you, I might find not just a research partner, but someone with whom I could share the burden of knowledge that has isolated me my entire life. Then why treat me as an experimental subject rather than a partner? Because I am a coward, Charlotte. The admission seems torn from him. It was easier to maintain scientific distance than to risk true connection. Easier to justify my actions as necessary for research than to acknowledge I had developed feelings I could neither quantify nor control. I am speechless, my spectral form flickering with the turbulence of my emotions. This is more revelation than Edward has offered in all our months together. You experimented on me because you were afraid to love me? The bitter irony is almost too much to bear. I experimented on you because I already did. He finally meets my gaze, his eyes haunted. And that terrified me more than death itself. The room falls silent save for the ticking of the clock and the shallow breathing of my physical form. Outside, the snow falls more heavily, insulating Blackmoore Manor from the outside world. We are alone with this confession hanging between us. We've wasted so much time, I finally say. Yes, and now we have so little left. With those words, a new urgency enters our work. Edward brings more equipment to my bedchamber, converting it into a laboratory while still maintaining the dignity of my physical form. We redouble our efforts on the reversal formula, working with a synchronicity that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. Lady Eleanor, Edward's sister, arrives unannounced the following day. I watch unseen as she confronts her brother in the library. The servants write that you've secluded yourself for months, she says, removing her gloves with sharp, efficient movements. That you speak to empty rooms and have transformed Charlotte's bedchamber into some sort of scientific workshop. Are the rumors of your madness true, then? Edward doesn't look up from the book he is consulting. If by madness you mean that I am attempting to save my wife's life through unconventional means, then yes. Eleanor sighs, settling herself in a chair opposite him. Unlike her brother, she is all warmth and expressiveness, her dark eyes quick to flash with emotion. Edward, you must accept that Charlotte's condition is beyond help. Dr. Morris told me months ago that her survival was unlikely. Dr. Morris is an incompetent fool who understood nothing of her true condition. And you do? Because you've been experimenting on her? There is no accusation in Eleanor's tone, only weary acceptance of her brother's obsessions. Edward finally meets his sister's gaze. I understand more than anyone else could. And yes, I have made grave errors in my treatment of Charlotte, errors I am now attempting to rectify. Eleanor studies him for a long moment. You've changed, brother. There's something different about you. Perhaps I am finally becoming human, he says with a self-deprecating smile that transforms his usually severe face. His sister's eyebrows rise in surprise. If that's true, then perhaps there is hope for you yet. She stands, moving to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. I'll stay for a few days, to help or to arrange proper care for Charlotte if your efforts are unsuccessful. Thank you, Eleanor. Your support means more than I can express. After she leaves, Edward remains motionless, staring into the fire. I wish I could manifest during daylight hours to let him know I witnessed this exchange, to acknowledge the small but significant changes in him. Instead, I am trapped in my dormant body, able only to observe through a strange, detached awareness that has developed as my condition progresses. That night, when I materialize in my bedchamber, I find Edward and Eleanor both present. Edward has clearly prepared his sister for my appearance, but theoretical knowledge is poor defense against the shock of seeing a ghost materialize before one's eyes. Eleanor gasps, her hand flying to her throat. My God, Edward. It's true. Hello, Eleanor, I say, my voice stronger than in previous manifestations. Each night my spectral form grows more substantial as my physical body weakens. I'm afraid I'm not quite the sister-in-law you remember. To her credit, Eleanor recovers quickly. Charlotte, or should I address you as something else? I am still Charlotte, I assure her. Still your brother's wife, however unconventional my current state. Eleanor turns to Edward. You did this to her, your experiments. Yes. Edward does not attempt to defend himself. And now, you're trying to undo it? With Charlotte's cooperation? Yes. Eleanor looks between us, observing the strange dynamic that has developed in these past weeks. You are working together then? A partnership? Of necessity, I say. Of choice, Edward corrects quietly. Eleanor's sharp eyes miss nothing. I see. Well, then I shall assist however I can. What do you need from me? Her practical acceptance is exactly what we need. With Eleanor's help, we accelerate our preparations. She manages the household, keeping servants away from my bedchamber, procuring supplies without raising suspicion, and providing a fresh perspective on our research. Your father's theory about electrical stimulation reminds me of the work being done at the Royal Society, Eleanor mentions one evening as we review our plans. Dr. Harrington demonstrated a device that could measure the electrical impulses of a frog's heart and stimulate it even after apparent death. Edward's head snaps up. Harrington? I wasn't aware he had progressed to practical applications. He presented his findings last autumn, while you were— Eleanor glances at me, otherwise occupied. This could be the missing element, Edward says, already sketching modifications to the apparatus he has been constructing. A way to precisely calibrate the electrical charge needed to reintegrate Charlotte's consciousness without destroying it. Can you obtain one of these devices? I ask. Eleanor smiles, a mischievous expression that suddenly highlights her resemblance to Edward when he is excited by a discovery. I already have. Doctor, Harrington has been calling on me for months. It was a simple matter to express interest in his work and borrow a prototype. Edward stares at his sister with newfound respect. You've been holding out on us. I wanted to be certain of your intentions before providing tools that might do more harm than good, she replies frankly. But I've watched you both these past nights. Whatever mistakes you've made, Edward, I believe you truly wish to restore Charlotte now. The device arrives the following day, delivered by an unwitting Dr. Harrington, who believes he is simply indulging a lady's scientific curiosity. It is a complex arrangement of wires, metal plates, and calibrated gauges that Eleanor helps us install in my bedchamber. The reversal formula is complete, Edward announces as we make final preparations. We've synthesized the compounds exactly according to your father's theories, adjusted for the specific properties of the original formula I administered. And the electrical component? I ask, eyeing the Harrington device with trepidation. Eleanor has helped me calibrate it to the precise frequency your father specified. It should provide the stimulus necessary for your consciousness to fully reintegrate with your physical form. I drift to my bedside, looking down at the shell that once contained me fully. My body has grown so frail, the skin nearly translucent, blue veins visible beneath the surface. Yet there is still life there, a tenuous, fragile spark that has resisted extinction. How much time remains, I ask, though I already know the answer. I can feel the weakening connection between my spirit and flesh. 3 days, Edward says grimly. Perhaps 4. The deterioration has accelerated despite our best efforts to stabilize your physical form. Then we must proceed tomorrow night, I decide, when my spectral manifestation is strongest. Eleanor, ever practical, asks the question Edward and I have been avoiding. And if it fails? If Charlotte's consciousness is lost entirely? The room falls silent as we confront this possibility. I am the first to speak. Then I will have died attempting to live fully rather than existing in this half-state. It is a risk I choose to take. Edward's expression tightens with what I now recognize as fear, not for himself, but for me. I will ensure the procedure is as safe as possible. We've corrected all the errors in the original formula, accounted for every variable. Science can never account for every variable, Edward. You taught me that. I move closer to him, wishing not for the first time that I could touch him, if only to offer reassurance. Some things must be taken on faith. Faith has never been my strong suit, he admits. Nor mine, adds Eleanor. But I have faith in you both, however strange that may sound. We spend the remainder of the night making final preparations. Edward triple-checks every component of the procedure, while Eleanor helps me compose a letter to be delivered in the event of my permanent death. It is a strange experience, dictating my own potential eulogy, but there is comfort in knowing that if I fail to survive, at least the truth of what happened at Blackmoore Manor will not die with me. As dawn approaches and my spectral form begins to fade, Edward catches my gaze. Charlotte, if tomorrow's procedure fails, he struggles to find words, emotion overcoming his usual precision. I know, Edward, I say softly. I know. The day passes in a strange limbo. I am vaguely aware of activity around my physical form. Edward administering preparatory compounds, Eleanor arranging the room according to our plans, servants being sent away on invented errands to ensure our privacy. Yet these observations come as if through layers of fog, my consciousness retreating further from my body with each passing hour. When night finally falls and the grandfather clock strikes midnight, I manifest more strongly than ever before. The reversal formula Edward has been introducing to my physical body throughout the day has already begun to affect the balance between my corporeal and spiritual forms. I feel a pull toward my body that has been absent in previous manifestations. "It's working," Edward says, observing the readings on the Harrington device. "Your electrical patterns are beginning to synchronize. We must proceed quickly before the preparatory compounds lose potency." Eleanor has arranged my physical form on the bed, dressed in a simple white nightgown, hair brushed and arranged as if for a formal portrait. The contrast between my spectral appearance, still clad in the black dress of my supposed funeral, and my physical body's white-garbed form is stark. "Are you ready?" Edward asks, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. "Yes," I reply, though truth be told, I am terrified. What awaits me if this fails? Oblivion? Some afterlife I cannot imagine? Or perhaps eternal haunting, forever disconnected from the physical world yet unable to move beyond it? And if it succeeds, return to a life where I must decide whether to expose Edward's crimes or attempt to build something new from the broken pieces of our marriage. Neither path seems simple or painless. Edward begins the procedure, injecting my physical form with the reversal formula, while Eleanor monitors the Harrington device. I hover near my body, watching as the clear liquid enters my veins, feeling an immediate tugging sensation, as if invisible threads are attempting to pull me into my flesh. "Approach your body, Charlotte," Edward instructs. "The formula is creating a channel for reintegration, but you must will yourself to return." I move closer, positioning my spectral form directly above my physical one. The sensation intensifies, no longer just a tugging, but a magnetic attraction that grows stronger with each passing moment. Below me, my body begins to respond, fingers twitching, eyelids fluttering. "The electrical patterns are aligning," Eleanor reports, watching the device's gauges. Her brain activity is increasing dramatically. Edward nods, making a minute adjustment to the apparatus connected to my body. "Charlotte, you must synchronize your consciousness with the patterns. Focus on the rhythm. Feel the pulses." I do as instructed, attuning myself to the subtle electrical current now flowing through my physical form. It creates a pattern, a tempo that my spectral consciousness begins to match automatically. The alignment produces an unexpected sensation, memories flooding back with vivid intensity. I remember my mother's face, though she died when I was only 4 years old. I remember the first time I held a book on my own, the feel of the leather binding, the smell of the pages. I remember the precise shade of the sky on the day Edward first spoke to me, a clear blue that seemed to promise possibilities. These are physical memories, stored in the body I've been partially separated from for months. "It's working," Edward whispers, watching in awe as my spectral form begins to lose its distinct boundaries, becoming more of a luminous mist that surrounds my physical body. The process is not painful exactly, but intensely disorienting. I feel simultaneously expanded and compressed, my consciousness stretching to encompass both states of being, and then gradually concentrating back into the physical vessel that has waited so patiently for my return. "Electrical activity is peaking," Eleanor warns. "We're approaching the critical threshold." "Now, Charlotte," Edward urges, "you must commit fully to the reintegration. Let go of your spectral state entirely. This is the moment of greatest risk, the complete surrender of the form that has granted me mobility and awareness these past months. If the reintegration fails at this point, my consciousness could be lost entirely, neither in body nor in spirit." I look at Edward one last time in my spectral form, trying to memorize his face as it is now, open, vulnerable, stripped of scientific detachment. Then I close my eyes and let go, surrendering to the pull of flesh and bone and blood. The sensation that follows defies description, a rushing, a compression, an electrical storm inside my mind. I am everywhere and nowhere, expanded to the size of the universe, and then abruptly confined to the smallest space imaginable. I hear Eleanor gasp, hear Edward call my name with desperate intensity, and then silence, darkness, and finally, pain. Exquisite, excruciating, undeniable pain that can only mean one thing. I am alive. I am whole. I have returned. Opening my eyes is an ordeal I had forgotten. The simple act of lifting eyelids, such delicate tissue, yet so leaden after months of disuse, requires concentration I can barely summon. When I finally succeed, the dim lamplight of my bedchamber sears my vision like midday sun. I close them again immediately, a soft moan escaping my lips. "Charlotte?" Edward's voice comes from nearby, tentative yet urgent. "Can you hear me?" I try to speak, but my throat produces only a dry rasp. How strange to have forgotten the mechanics of my own body, the sequence of small actions required for the simplest communication. I feel a cool glass pressed gently against my lips. "Water," Eleanor's voice explains unnecessarily. "Slowly now. The liquid is life itself, awakening nerves that have been dormant for too long." I manage a small sip, then another, before the glass is withdrawn. Cautiously, I attempt to open my eyes again, squinting against the light until shapes gradually resolve themselves into recognizable forms. Edward and Eleanor hover on either side of my bed, their faces taut with concern and exhaustion. Behind them, the Harrington device still hums softly, its gauges and dials recording the miracle, or monstrosity, of my return to full corporeality. "Did it?" My voice breaks, unfamiliar in my own ears. I try again. "Did it work completely?" Edward's scientific caution battles visibly with hope. "The readings suggest full reintegration, but we'll need to monitor you closely for several days to be certain." "How do you feel?" Eleanor asks, pressing a cool hand to my forehead. How do I feel? The question seems simultaneously trivial and impossible to answer. Every sensation is overwhelming. The weight of the bedclothes against my skin, the subtle movements of air currents across my face, the ceaseless rhythm of my heart pumping blood through vessels that feel newly formed. Pain radiates from every cell, yet beneath it lies an extraordinary awareness of being unified again. Consciousness and body rejoined. Present, I finally manage. I feel present. A ghost of a smile touches Edward's lips. A precise observation, as always. I attempt to move my hand, wanting to touch something, to confirm my ability to interact with the physical world again. My fingers twitch, then slowly rise a few inches from the bedsheet. The effort leaves me breathless, but the triumph of it brings tears to my eyes. "Careful," Edward cautions, noticing my tears. "Your body has been in stasis for months. Motor control, muscle strength, even your tear ducts will take time to function normally again." "I'm not sad," I whisper, the tears continuing regardless. "I'm here." Eleanor, more attuned to emotional nuances than her brother, squeezes my shoulder gently. "Yes, you are. Quite miraculous indeed." The next several days pass in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and gradual rediscovery. My body, so long maintained in artificial suspension, rebels against active consciousness with violent headaches, muscle spasms, and digestive distress. Edward monitors every symptom with scientific precision, adjusting treatments and supports accordingly, while Eleanor provides the practical care my weakened state requires. Neither of them leaves my side. They take turns sleeping in shifts, one always awake to observe and attend me. I drift between consciousness and slumber, each awakening bringing slightly more strength, slightly less pain. Through it all, I am acutely aware of Edward's gaze, no longer the cold assessment of a scientist studying a specimen, but something far more complex and human. On the 4th day after my reintegration, I managed to sit up in bed without assistance. The simple achievement feels momentous. "The color is returning to your cheeks," Eleanor observes as she helps me sip a strengthening broth. "You look almost yourself again, though rather thinner." I catch sight of my reflection in the hand mirror on my bedside table and barely recognize the woman looking back at me. My once golden hair remains stark white, my face gaunt, cheekbones too prominent above hollowed cheeks. Only my eyes seem unchanged, perhaps even more intense than before. I will never be who I was, I say, setting down the broth. That Charlotte died on the Duke's laboratory table. Eleanor glances toward the door, ensuring Edward is still downstairs consulting with the physician he has summoned under pretense of checking on my improving condition. What will you do now, Charlotte? She asks quietly. About Edward? About what he did to you? The question has haunted me through my gradual recovery. What justice could possibly balance the scales of such a violation? Yet what would justice mean now, after all that has transpired between us? I don't know, I admit. Part of me still wants to flee this house and never look back, to expose what happened here and watch your brother face the consequences of his actions. And the other part? I stare down at my hands, still too thin, veins prominent beneath translucent skin, but undeniably alive, undeniably mine again. The other part recognizes that Edward is not the same man who strapped me to that table, that somehow, in the process of helping me return, he has undergone a transformation of his own. My brother has always been brilliant but cold, Eleanor says thoughtfully. Since childhood, he has kept the world at arm's length, as if emotions were contagions to be avoided. I have never seen him as I have these past weeks, vulnerable, remorseful, almost human. His humanity came at a terrible price. Yes, Eleanor does not attempt to excuse or minimize Edward's actions. A price he now understands was far too high. Before I can respond, Edward returns, the visiting physician trailing behind him. Dr. Phillips is a ruddy-faced man with side whiskers and an air of self-importance that diminishes somewhat in Edward's commanding presence. He examines me with professional detachment, asking perfunctory questions about my appetite, sleep, and comfort. I answer carefully, maintaining the fiction that I have been suffering from a wasting illness rather than a scientific experiment gone horribly awry. A remarkable recovery, Your Grace, Dr. Phillips pronounces, addressing Edward rather than me. Most unexpected, given the severity of the Duchess's condition when I last attended her. My wife has always been stronger than she appears, Edward replies, his eyes meeting mine over the doctor's head. After the physician departs with a generous fee and firm instructions not to overtax myself, Edward lingers in my bedchamber, uncharacteristically hesitant. Charlotte, there is something we must discuss, he begins, taking a seat beside my bed. Eleanor quietly excuses herself, closing the door behind her. Yes? I straighten against my pillows, determined to face whatever comes next with dignity. Your current condition, while greatly improved, remains precarious. His scientific precision returns when discussing medical matters. The reintegration appears to have succeeded completely, but your body suffered significant atrophy during your months of stasis. Full recovery will require careful management and considerable time. I am aware of my limitations, Edward. What you may not be aware of is that some changes appear permanent. He gestures toward my white hair. The process has fundamentally altered certain aspects of your physiology. Your heart rate remains significantly slower than normal. Your body temperature runs cooler, and there are other, more subtle changes to your nervous system. What are you saying? That I'm still not fully human? He winces at my blunt phrasing. You are entirely human, Charlotte. But you are different than before. The experience has marked you in ways I cannot fully explain or predict. I absorb this information, adding it to the growing catalog of ways my life has been irreparably changed by Edward's actions. Will these differences shorten my life? Am I still dying, just more slowly? On the contrary, he says, surprising me. Based on the cellular samples I've examined, the process appears to have dramatically slowed your aging at the cellular level. If this continues, you may live considerably longer than average, with a delayed onset of typical age-related decline. The irony is almost too much to bear. So in trying to preserve your own life by conquering death, you've accidentally granted me extended life instead? It appears so, yes. He looks away, unable to meet my gaze. Though I would never have chosen this path had I understood the consequences. A heavy silence falls between us. Outside my window, rain begins to patter against the glass, a gentle counterpoint to the tension in the room. Why are you telling me this now, Edward? Because you deserve to know everything about your condition before you decide your future. He rises, moving to stand by the window, his back to me. I have made arrangements for you, should you wish to leave Blackmoore. A house in Bath, a generous allowance, staff who know nothing of what transpired here. You could begin anew, free from me. The offer takes me aback. After all his efforts to restore me, after the transformation I have witnessed in him, Edward is offering me freedom without a fight. You would let me go so easily? He turns, and the raw emotion on his face startles me. There would be nothing easy about it, Charlotte, but I have taken enough choices from you. I will not take this one as well. I study him carefully. This man who has been by turns my husband, my captor, my destroyer, and my savior. The Edward Blackmoore who stands before me now bears little resemblance to the cold scientist who first brought me to this manor. His eyes, once distant and analytical, now reveal depths of feeling he can no longer conceal. His posture, once rigid with self-control, now betrays the vulnerability he has spent a lifetime denying. And if I choose to stay, what then? I ask, needing to understand all options before me. Then we would proceed however you wish. He speaks carefully, measuring each word. We could maintain separate lives within Blackmoore Manor. Or, if you were willing, we might attempt to build something new between us. Not the sham of a marriage we had before, but perhaps in time, something genuine. You believe that possible? After everything? Edward approaches the bed again, though he does not sit, maintaining a respectful distance. I believe that the woman who fought her way back from the very threshold of death is capable of anything she sets her mind to. Whether she should want to rebuild a relationship with the man who put her there is another question entirely. His honesty disarms me. There are no platitudes, no false promises, no manipulation in his words, only a painful truth acknowledged by us both. I need time, I say finally, time to regain my strength, to understand who I am now, what I want. Of course. He moves toward the door. Take all the time you need. Blackmoore is your home for as long as you wish it to be, regardless of your decision about our future. As he reaches for the doorknob, I find myself calling after him. Edward. He pauses, looking back. Thank you for bringing me back. A shadow crosses his face. Do not thank me for undoing a harm I should never have caused. Nevertheless, I am alive because of your efforts, whatever your initial sins. He nods once, unable to respond further, and leaves quietly. I am left alone with my thoughts, the rain increasing outside my window, drumming against glass that now feels like a connection to the world rather than a barrier. The weeks that follow bring steady improvement to my physical condition. I progress from sitting to standing, from standing to walking short distances, and finally to moving freely throughout the manor. My strength returns gradually, my body remembering its former capabilities even as it adjusts to its new peculiarities. True to his word, Edward does not pressure me in any way. He maintains a respectful distance, available when I require his medical expertise, but otherwise allowing me complete autonomy within Blackmoore. Eleanor remains as well, providing companionship and practical support, though I suspect her continued presence is as much to observe her brother as to assist me. It is Eleanor who first suggests I venture beyond the manor grounds. The fresh air would do you good, she insists one morning as we break our fast in the solarium. The village is preparing for the spring festival. Nothing too taxing, just local crafts and music in the square. I hesitate, uncertain how to face the outside world. The servants have grown accustomed to my changed appearance, no longer startling at my white hair or commenting on my altered voice. But strangers would see only a haunted-looking woman beside the mysterious Duke of Blackmoore. People will stare, I protest. People always stare at a duchess, Eleanor counters pragmatically, especially one who has been absent from society due to illness. Better to face it directly than hide away forever. Edward, entering the solarium in time to hear our exchange, pauses by the doorway. Eleanor is right, he says quietly. Isolation will only feed rumors and speculation. A brief public appearance would demonstrate your recovery and silence the worst of the gossip. I notice he does not pressure me to maintain appearances for his sake, as the old Edward might have done. There is no concern for his reputation or standing in his suggestion, only consideration for my well-being. Very well, I concede, but a short visit only. I tire easily still. Of course, Eleanor agrees, pleased to have won her point. We shall go tomorrow. The weather promises to be fine. That evening, I find myself drawn to the library, a room I have avoided since my recovery. It was here, after all, that I first discovered the hidden entrance to Edward's laboratory, setting in motion the catastrophe that followed. Yet it is also a room filled with knowledge I now crave as I attempt to understand my altered existence. I am not entirely surprised to find Edward already there, seated in a leather armchair with a volume of medical texts open on his lap. He rises immediately when I enter. "Charlotte, do you need something?" "Only a book," I reply, moving toward the shelves. "Unless my presence disturbs you?" "Not at all." He hesitates, then adds, "Though I can leave if you would prefer solitude." I shake my head. "That isn't necessary. The library is large enough for us both." We settle into an unexpectedly comfortable silence, Edward returning to his reading while I browse the shelves. I select several volumes on cellular biology and the latest research on nervous system function, then take a seat in a chair angled away from Edward, but not pointedly distant. After some time, curiosity overcomes my reserve. "What are you reading?" He glances up, momentarily surprised by my initiation of conversation. "Barron's new work on cardiac electrophysiology. He has developed some intriguing theories about the electrical patterns of heartbeats in various states of health and disease." "Relevant to my condition?" I ask, noting the carefulness with which he now discusses scientific matters with me. "Potentially. Your heart rate has stabilized at approximately 40 beats per minute, half the normal rate, yet you show no signs of impaired function. Barron's might offer some insight as to why. I consider this information, adding it to my growing understanding of my new physiology. Do you believe anyone has experienced a condition like mine before?" "Not precisely," Edward admits, though there are recorded cases of individuals surviving extreme conditions, hibernation-like states during freezing temperatures, or yogic adepts who can dramatically slow their metabolic processes through meditation. Your situation appears to be a more permanent version of these temporary states. "A human clock running at half speed," I muse. An imperfect analogy, but not entirely inaccurate. A hint of the old scientific enthusiasm colors his voice before he catches himself, expression sobering. "I apologize. I should not discuss you as a case study." "It's all right, Edward." I surprise myself with my own response. I want to understand what has happened to me, who I am now. Your scientific perspective is valuable. So long as you remember, I am a person first and a phenomenon second. He nods slowly, seemingly relieved by my pragmatic approach, a perspective I should have maintained from the beginning. "Yes," I agree simply, neither absolving nor condemning him. We lapse back into silence, but something has shifted subtly between us. For the first time since my reintegration, we have engaged as intellectual equals rather than victim and perpetrator, patient and physician, estranged wife and remorseful husband. It is a small step, but perhaps a significant one. The following day dawns clear and mild, perfect for my first venture into the village. Eleanor helps me dress in a simple but elegant gown of deep blue, a color chosen deliberately to complement my altered appearance rather than attempt to disguise it. "You look striking," she assures me, as she arranges my white hair in a modest chignon. "Dignified and quite remarkable." "Remarkable is one word for it," I murmur, studying my reflection. The woman in the mirror is a stranger still, too pale, too thin, with eyes that seem to hold knowledge no human should possess. Yet there is strength in her face that was not there before, a quiet determination that feels entirely my own. Edward is waiting for us in the entrance hall, dressed formally but not ostentatiously. He offers his arm to me with a questioning glance, prepared for rejection. After a moment's hesitation, I place my hand lightly upon it. This public outing will be difficult enough without the added complication of obvious estrangement between the Duke and Duchess. The carriage ride to the village passes in tense silence. I gaze out the window, marveling at the simple beauty of the countryside. The vibrant green of early spring, the wildflowers dotting the meadows, the clarity of the sky overhead. These ordinary sights feel extraordinary after my months of existence between life and death. "It's all so vivid," I murmur, half to myself. "Your visual perception may be enhanced," Edward observes quietly from across the carriage. Your pupils react differently to light now. More sensitive, more adaptive. Like a cat's? Eleanor asks with characteristic directness. Not quite so dramatic, Edward replies with the ghost of a smile. But yes, somewhat similar in function. I consider this new information as the carriage approaches the village square, already busy with festival preparations. Colorful banners hang between buildings, stalls display local crafts and early spring produce, and a small band plays cheerful folk tunes near the ancient stone fountain at the center. Are you certain you're ready for this? Edward asks as the carriage stops. We can return to Blackmoore at any time. I'm ready, I say, more firmly than I feel. It's time the world saw the new Duchess of Blackmoore. As Edward helps me descend from the carriage, a hush falls over the nearest villagers, followed immediately by a swell of whispers. I stand straighter, chin lifted, meeting their curious gazes directly rather than shrinking from them. Good day, I greet the closest group, forcing warmth into my voice. What a lovely celebration you're preparing. The baker's wife curtsies hastily. Your Grace, we had heard you were recovering, but this is a most welcome surprise. I have been unwell for some time, I acknowledge, the practiced half-truth coming easily. But I am much improved now, thanks to the Duke's devoted care. Edward's hand tightens almost imperceptibly on my arm at these words, though his expression remains composed. My wife's strength and determination deserve all credit for her recovery, he counters smoothly. I merely provided what support I could. This exchange seems to break the initial tension. The villagers, while clearly curious about my transformed appearance, respond to our united front with cautious acceptance. We move through the square slowly, stopping at various stalls, exchanging pleasantries with local shopkeepers and farmers. I find myself genuinely enjoying the simple human interactions after so long in isolation. At the flower stall, a small girl of perhaps 5 years approaches me without the wariness of the adults. She stares up at my white hair with undisguised fascination. Are you a snow queen? She asks innocently. From the storybooks? Her mother begins to apologize, but I wave away her concerns, kneeling carefully to the child's level. Not a queen of snow, I tell her with a genuine smile. Just a lady who has been through a very long winter. The girl nods sagely, as if this explanation makes perfect sense to her. But spring is here now, she informs me seriously. So you'll get better. Yes, I agree, oddly touched by her simple wisdom. I believe I will. As we continue our circuit of the square, I notice Edward watching me with an unreadable expression. His scientific detachment has been replaced by something far more complex, concern certainly, but also a kind of wonder, as if he too is seeing me anew. The village musicians strike up a livelier tune, and some of the younger people begin to dance in the cleared area before the fountain. Eleanor is quickly claimed by Dr. Harrington, who has apparently continued his pursuit despite her borrowing of his equipment under false pretenses. Left momentarily alone with Edward, I find myself unsure what to say. The ease we had briefly found in the library the previous evening seems elusive here, under public scrutiny. You're managing admirably, he observes quietly. The villagers are already revising their gossip from deathbed tragedy to miraculous recovery. Is that why we came? To manage gossip? No. His gaze is steady on mine. We came because Eleanor was right. You needed to reclaim your place in the world, and perhaps because I needed to be reminded that Blackmoore Manor is not the entirety of existence, though it has felt that way these past months. Before I can respond, we are interrupted by the vicar, an elderly man who has served the parish since before Edward was born. Your Grace, he addresses Edward first, then turns to me with gentle concern. And Lady Blackmoore, how wonderful to see you in improved health. We have kept you in our prayers these many months. Thank you, Vicar, I reply. Your prayers have evidently been effective. God works in mysterious ways, he agrees, his kind eyes taking in my altered appearance without judgment. Often through trials, we would never choose for ourselves. His words strike closer to home than he could possibly know. I glance at Edward, who is tensed beside me, his jaw tight. Indeed, I murmur. Though I find myself changed by the experience, I am grateful to be standing here today. Changed but not diminished, the vicar observes with surprising perception. There is a strength about you now, your grace, if you'll permit an old man's observation. I value your insight, vicar, I respond, genuinely touched by his kindness. After the vicar moves on to greet other parishioners, Edward leans closer to speak privately. He's right, you know, about your strength. I look up at him, struck by the sincerity in his expression. A strength born of necessity, not choice, yet yours nonetheless. He hesitates, then adds, I have never properly apologized to you, Charlotte. Not in so many words. I convinced myself that actions spoke more clearly than verbal contrition, but perhaps that was cowardice on my part. I glance around at the villagers, the festive atmosphere, the ordinary life continuing all around us. This is hardly the place. No place is suitable for such an apology, he interrupts quietly. No words could possibly suffice, but I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I did to you. Not just for the experiment itself, but for treating you as less than fully human from the moment of our marriage. You deserved better. You still do. The simple, unadorned sincerity of his words catches me off guard. There is no scientific justification, no rationalization, no attempt to mitigate his culpability, only a straightforward acknowledgement of wrong done and regret felt. Thank you, I say finally, uncertain how else to respond to this unexpected declaration. Edward nods once, accepting my limited response without pressing for more. Shall we rejoin Eleanor? You should not overtax yourself on your first outing. Yes, that would be wise. I place my hand on his arm again, noting the surprise that flickers briefly across his face at this voluntary contact. As we make our way through the crowd, I am acutely aware of the man beside me, no longer the cold, distant Duke who had brought me to Blackmoore, nor the desperate scientist who had worked to restore me, but someone new emerging from those former selves, someone capable of genuine remorse, of seeing me truly at last. The question that has haunted me since my reintegration resurfaces with new urgency. What do I want from the future? From Edward? From myself? I have no clear answer yet, but as we return to the carriage, the spring sunshine warm on my face and the simple pleasure of human connection humming through my veins, I feel for the first time that an answer might be possible, that a future worth living, perhaps even worth embracing, awaits me, if I have the courage to claim it. Summer arrives at Blackmoore Manor with unexpected gentleness. The gardens bloom with wild abundance, as if making up for the winter that held its grip so tenaciously. I spend hours among the roses, their perfume a sensory delight to my heightened perception. My white hair, no longer a shock when I glimpse my reflection, gleams like polished silver against the vibrant backdrop of flowers. 3 months have passed since my reintegration. 3 months of healing, of rediscovery, of cautious steps toward a future I could never have imagined. My body has regained its strength, though it remains changed in ways both obvious and subtle. I move more deliberately now, each gesture precise and economical. My heartbeat maintains its slow, steady rhythm, requiring less sustenance, less sleep, yet offering sharper awareness in return. Edward continues his research into my condition, with my full knowledge and consent. Each test, each observation is carefully explained, its purpose clear, my right to refuse explicitly acknowledged. It is a strange reversal of our former dynamic. The scientist now deferential to his subject, the husband cautiously respectful of his wife's autonomy. We have settled into an arrangement neither of us could have predicted. I remain at Blackmoore, in my own chambers, neither fleeing my husband nor returning to his bed. We take breakfast together most mornings, discussing scientific journals or estate matters with growing ease. In the evenings, we often read in the library, sharing observations about our respective books across the comfortable silence. It is not quite a marriage, yet more than a coldly practical arrangement. Eleanor, satisfied with my recovery and Edward's transformation, has returned to London for the season, though she writes regularly with society gossip and updates on her burgeoning relationship with Dr. Harrington. Her absence leaves Edward and me truly alone together for the first time since my restoration. I am in the rose garden, scissors in hand, selecting blooms for the dinner table, when I sense Edward's approach. He moves differently now, more openly, with deliberate noise to avoid startling me, never appearing suddenly as he once did. "The white roses are particularly fine this year," he observes, stopping a respectful distance away. "Yes," I agree, snipping a perfect specimen and adding it to my basket. "Though I find myself drawn to these pink varieties as well. My mother grew similar ones at our country house when I was a child." Edward watches me work, his expression thoughtful. "I received a letter today from Professor Jensen at the Royal Academy of Sciences. He's invited me to present my research on electrical stimulus patterns at their symposium next month." I straighten, turning to face him fully. "You should accept. Your work with the Harrington device has significant implications beyond our personal application." I've written back declining the invitation. This surprises me. The old Edward would never have refused such an opportunity for professional recognition. "Why?" "Your research is groundbreaking, even without revealing its full context." He meets my gaze steadily. "I have no desire to leave Blackmoore at present, nor do I wish to present partial truths about discoveries that came at such a terrible price." The unspoken question hangs between us. How much of what happened in his laboratory should ever be shared with the scientific community? How much of me should become subject to academic inquiry? "The choice should be yours," Edward continues. "As the person most affected by this research, I will publish nothing, share nothing, without your explicit consent." This acknowledgement of my sovereignty over my own experience still strikes me as remarkable, coming from the man who once denied it so completely. And if I wished the whole truth known? My restoration proclaimed a miracle of modern science. Your name celebrated for conquering the boundary between life and death. Then I would correct the record immediately, he replies without hesitation, making it clear that the miracle came only after an unconscionable violation, and that any celebration would be grotesquely misplaced. I study him in the golden afternoon light. At 40, Edward Blackmoore remains a handsome man, his features strong and aristocratic. Yet the cold perfection that once defined him has yielded to something more human. Lines of worry and remorse have etched themselves around his eyes and mouth. His dark hair now shows threads of silver at the temples that weren't present months ago. "You've changed, Edward." "Yes," he acknowledges this simple truth without elaboration. "Are you happier for it?" I ask, genuinely curious. He considers the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Happier is not the word I would choose. More complete, perhaps, less isolated within my own mind. I feel connected to the world in ways I previously avoided, even though that connection brings pain. Especially because it brings pain. He gestures toward the manor house looming behind us. I lived for years in that mausoleum of intellectual pursuit, convinced that emotions were weaknesses to be overcome. I believed myself superior for transcending the ordinary human experiences of grief, regret, attachment. He steps closer, careful still to maintain an appropriate distance. What I did to you revealed the hollowness of that belief. In causing you unimaginable suffering, I finally encountered my own capacity for feeling. First horror at what I had done, then desperate hope as we worked for your restoration, and now a complex mixture I am still learning to name. His honesty disarms me, as it increasingly does. This new Edward speaks his truth without calculation or strategic reserve. "And you?" he asks quietly. "Have these months at Blackmoore been bearable? Have you found any measure of peace?" I return to my roses, selecting another bloom for my basket as I consider my response. "More than I expected," I admit finally. At first, I remained only to recover my strength, convinced I would leave as soon as I was able. Then I stayed to understand my new condition, to ensure the changes were stable. And then, he prompts, gently, when I fall silent. And then I realized I no longer knew where else I would go, or who I would be away from this place. I meet his gaze directly. "The woman who came to Blackmoore as your bride no longer exists. The woman I am now was forged here through experiences both terrible and transformative. I am still discovering who she is, what she wants. Whatever she wants, I will help her attain it," Edward says with quiet intensity. "Whether that means remaining at Blackmoore or establishing a life elsewhere. Whether it includes me or requires my absence." The simple sincerity of this statement brings unexpected tears to my eyes. I turn away, ostensibly to cut another rose, unwilling to reveal this vulnerability. Charlotte. My name in his voice still holds power, though different now from when he first pronounced it. There is something else I must tell you. I steel myself, facing him again with roses in hand, thorns pricking my fingers despite my gloves. Yes? I've had papers drawn up transferring a significant portion of the Blackmoore estate and fortune into your name alone. He reaches into his jacket, withdrawing a folded document. Regardless of whether you choose to continue our marriage, these assets will ensure your independence for the remainder of your life, which, given your altered physiology, may be considerably longer than either of us initially anticipated. I take the papers with numb fingers, scarcely comprehending their significance. Why would you do this? Because it is right, he says simply. And because I want any choice you make about our future to be free from financial consideration. If you stay, I want it to be because you wish to, not because you must. I stare at the document, its legal language blurring before my eyes. This gesture, more than any words of apology or remorse, demonstrates how profoundly Edward has changed. The man who once controlled every aspect of my existence now offers me the means to determine my own fate. I don't know what to say. Say nothing for now, he suggests. Consider it simply another option available to you. He turns to leave, allowing me the solitude I suddenly crave, but I find myself calling after him. Edward. He pauses, looking back at me framed among the roses, my silver hair catching the late afternoon sun. Join me for dinner this evening, I say, the invitation spontaneous, yet deliberate. Not in the formal dining room, but in the small parlor. Something simple, just the two of us. A flicker of surprise crosses his face, followed by cautious pleasure. I would like that very much. After he leaves, I finish gathering my roses, mind whirling with the implications of his gift and my own impulsive invitation. Am I ready for what such a private dinner might signify? For the conversation it might initiate? I have maintained careful distance these past months, protecting myself as I healed, observing Edward's transformation with scientific detachment, worthy of the man himself. Yet beneath that detachment, other feelings have gradually emerged, complex, confusing, impossible to categorize neatly. Not forgiveness exactly, for what Edward did remains unforgivable in absolute terms. Not love as I once understood it, naive and idealistically pure. Something messier, more complicated, rooted in the strange intimacy of shared trauma and recovery. I arrange the roses in a crystal vase for the small parlor table, instructing the maid to set dinner for two in that cozier space rather than the cavernous dining room where we usually take our meals. Then I retreat to my chambers to prepare, spending more time on my appearance than I have since my restoration. My lady's maid helps me into a gown of deep emerald silk, a new acquisition that complements my altered coloring rather than fighting against it. I study the final result in my mirror, struck by the woman who stares back at me. No longer the frightened ghost in black who haunted Edward's balcony, nor the golden-haired bride who first arrived at Blackmoore. This woman, with her striking white hair and penetrating gaze, carries herself with quiet dignity and hard-won strength. Whether she is prepared to offer Edward a new beginning remains to be seen. He arrives precisely on time, dressed formally but not elaborately, his dark evening clothes a stark contrast to my vibrant green. His eyes widen slightly when he sees me, a reaction that brings unexpected warmth to my cheeks. "Charlotte," he says, the single word carrying volumes of meaning. "You look extraordinary. Thank you." I gesture to the small table set before the fire. I thought we might enjoy something less formal tonight. The dinner that follows is unlike any meal we have shared before, not the cold, silent affairs of our early marriage, nor the carefully polite exchanges of recent months. We speak of books we have read, scientific developments beyond Edward's specialized field, memories of places we have both visited, though never together. We avoid, by tacit agreement, any mention of the past year's events or the decision that looms before me. It is only when we have finished eating and moved to sit before the fire with glasses of port that Edward broaches weightier topics. "I've been thinking about your father's research," he says, staring into the amber liquid in his glass, "about where he went wrong, and where I followed the same flawed path." I sip my port, its sweetness lingering pleasantly on my tongue. What conclusion have you reached? That we both became so fixated on conquering death that we lost sight of the purpose of life. He looks up, meeting my gaze directly. Your father wished to extend his time to complete his work. I sought to overcome the Blackmoore family curse of early mortality. Both of us were driven by fear rather than purpose. And now? Now I understand that extending life means nothing without properly living it. His expression softens, vulnerability showing through his usual reserve. I existed rather than lived for most of my 40 years, Charlotte. It took nearly destroying you to make me see the emptiness of my so-called accomplishments. The raw honesty in his voice stirs something within me. And what would living properly look like to you now, Edward? He sets down his glass, choosing his words with evident care. Connection, purpose beyond mere intellectual achievement. Perhaps, if not happiness, then at least meaningful engagement with the world and those in it. He hesitates, then adds quietly, with you, if you were ever willing. The moment stretches between us, fraught with possibility. Part of me wants to retreat behind the safe walls of polite distance we have maintained these months. Another part, growing stronger each day, yearns to discover what might be possible between two people so profoundly transformed by shared experience. I've been reading your research notes, I say, changing direction slightly. The ones documenting my condition since reintegration. Edward tenses visibly. I should have asked your permission. No, I interrupt. That's not why I mention them. Your observations are clinical but respectful. What struck me was your conclusion about my altered lifespan. He nods cautiously. Based on cellular regeneration rates and metabolic changes, yes, you may live significantly longer than the normal human span. Perhaps twice as long, though that remains speculative. While you presumably will age and die normally. The thought brings unexpected pain, unless you were to subject yourself to your own procedure. Edward's expression hardens. I would never attempt that again. The cost is too high, the violation too great. But what if I were to offer it freely? The words escape before I've fully considered them. He stares at me in shock. Charlotte, you cannot mean, not the separation as I experienced it, I clarify quickly, but a modified version of the formula, the changes to my physiology without the spiritual division. It might be possible, with what we now understand. Why would you suggest this? He asks, genuine bewilderment in his voice. I look away, into the dancing flames of the fire, searching for an answer I can barely acknowledge to myself. Because I have been thinking about time, about futures, about what it might mean to outlive everyone I know by decades, to watch another husband age and die should I ever remarry, to exist as an eternally strange widow, preserved while the world changes around me. Edward remains silent, allowing me to find my way through these complicated thoughts. And perhaps, I continue more hesitantly, because despite everything, I cannot bear the thought of you suffering the early death you so feared. The death that drove you to such extremes in the first place. Charlotte, my name is barely a whisper on his lips. After what I did to you, how can you even consider such a thing? I turn back to him, meeting his gaze directly. Because I am no longer merely your victim, Edward. I refuse to be defined solely by what was done to me. I am a woman making choices about her future, a future that has been irrevocably altered but is still mine to determine. He rises abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the darkened gardens. I don't deserve such consideration from you. This isn't about what you deserve. I follow him, standing just behind his rigid form. It's about what I choose. The power to make that choice is the only thing of value to come from all this suffering. He turns to face me, his expression raw with emotion he no longer attempts to conceal. And what do you choose, Charlotte? Not about the formula, but about us, about Blackmoore, about the future. The question I have been avoiding these many months can no longer be deferred. I take a deep breath, centering myself in my altered body, in this moment of truth. I choose to stay, I say quietly, not out of obligation or necessity, but because Blackmoore has become part of me, just as I am now part of its history and its future. Hope flares in Edward's eyes, quickly tempered with caution. And us? Our marriage? That is a more complicated question. I move away, needing space to articulate thoughts I have barely acknowledged even to myself. I cannot return to what we were. That naive bride and her coldly detached husband no longer exist. No, he agrees softly. They don't. But perhaps, I turn back to him, summoning my courage. Perhaps something new might be possible. Not built on forgetting or forgiveness, but on understanding. On seeing each other truly for the first time. Edward remains motionless, as if afraid the slightest movement might shatter this fragile moment. What would that look like? I don't know precisely. I smile faintly. We would have to discover it together, step by step. Beginning as we are now. Two people irrevocably changed, connected by experiences no one else could possibly understand. And if it proves impossible? If the past casts too long a shadow? Then we would acknowledge that honestly, with dignity. I meet his gaze steadily. But I find I want to try, Edward. Despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, I want to discover if something worthwhile can be salvaged from these ruins. He moves toward me then, slowly, giving me every opportunity to retreat. When I remain in place, he carefully, reverently takes my hand in his. It is the first deliberate touch we have shared since my restoration that wasn't medically necessary or publicly performative. I want that too, he says, his voice low and fervent. More than I have words to express. The touch of his skin against mine sends an unexpected current through my altered nervous system. Not fear or revulsion as I might have expected, but something electric and alive. A recognition of possibility where I had assumed only ashes remained. Then we begin again, I say softly. Not as Duke and Duchess, scientist and subject, perpetrator and victim, but as Edward and Charlotte, two broken people attempting to create something whole between them. He lifts my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against my knuckles with such tender reverence that tears spring unexpectedly to my eyes. Thank you, he whispers against my skin, for the chance I don't deserve, but will spend a lifetime trying to earn. I withdraw my hand gently, not in rejection, but to establish the careful pace this new beginning requires. We have much to discuss, many boundaries to establish. This won't be simple or straightforward. I expect nothing simple, Edward agrees, accepting my withdrawal without protest. Only the privilege of walking this complicated path alongside you, however you determine its course. We return to our seats before the fire. The atmosphere between us shifted into something new, tentative yet strangely hopeful. We talk for hours, setting parameters for our unconventional reconciliation, establishing clear boundaries and expectations. Edward listens more than he speaks, his usual scientific precision now applied to understanding my needs and concerns rather than analyzing experimental data. It is well past midnight when I finally rise to retire. Edward stands as well, maintaining the respectful distance we have agreed upon for this early stage of our new arrangement. Good night, Charlotte, he says simply. Thank you for this evening. I pause at the doorway, looking back at him, this complex, flawed man who destroyed me and then helped rebuild me, who caused my greatest suffering and now offers my greatest understanding. There is something I wish to try, I say, the impulse surprising even me. If you are willing. Anything, he responds without hesitation. I return to where he stands, moving deliberately into his personal space. Slowly, giving myself every chance to reconsider, I reach up and place my palm against his cheek. His skin is warm beneath my perpetually cool fingers. His breath catches, eyes widening at this unexpected contact. He remains perfectly still, allowing me complete control of the moment. When I was the lady in black on your balcony, I say softly, this was what I missed most, the ability to touch, to connect physically with the world, even with you, despite everything. Edward swallows visibly, emotion making his voice rough. I remember watching you try to touch things, the frustration in your eyes when your hand passed through solid objects. Yes, I study his face, noting each line of care, each mark of the past year's trials. I learned then that connection, even difficult, complicated connection, matters more than I had realized. I withdraw my hand slowly, the brief contact complete, but something important established between us. Good night, Edward. As I walk to my chambers through the quiet halls of Blackmoore Manor, I feel lighter than I have since before my transformation. Not healed completely, never that, but moving purposefully forward rather than merely surviving. The future stretches before me differently than I had ever imagined. Longer, stranger, filled with complexities I am only beginning to understand. Yet for the first time, I face that future not with dread or resignation, but with a cautious sense of possibility. The lady in black who appeared every night on the Duke's balcony is gone now, integrated back into her living form. But her strength remains with me, her determination to exist despite impossible circumstances, her refusal to disappear quietly. I reach my bedchamber and move to the window, looking out at the grounds of Blackmoore silvered by moonlight. I am reminded of those nights when I stood on Edward's balcony, watching him through the glass, two beings separated by more than mere physical barriers. Now we stand on the same side of the glass, tentatively reaching across different but equally formidable divisions. Whether love can grow in soil so darkened by past trauma remains to be seen. But as I prepare for sleep, I find myself contemplating not just the months of painful recovery behind me, but the years, perhaps many more than ordinary humans are granted, that lie ahead. Years to discover who the Duchess of Blackmoore might become when she is neither victim nor avenger, neither experiment nor ghost, but simply a woman extraordinary in her ordinariness, choosing her own path forward. The lady in black has vanished from the Duke's balcony. In her place stands Charlotte Blackmoore, white-haired and changed, but finally, unquestionably, alive. 6 months later, Edward joins me on our usual evening walk through the grounds of Blackmoore. Autumn has painted the landscape in russet and gold, a vibrant backdrop to the quiet routines we have established in our gradually evolving relationship. Your latest tests confirm what we suspected, he tells me, his scientific precision now balanced with gentle consideration. The cellular alterations have fully stabilized. Your condition appears permanent but entirely sustainable. I nod, having expected this confirmation. And the modified formula you've been developing? A shadow crosses his face. It shows promise in replicating the positive aspects of your altered physiology without risking consciousness separation. But I remain reluctant to test it, even on myself, because of the memories it evokes? Partly, he acknowledges, and partly because I've come to question whether extended life should be pursued at all, even through safer means. Perhaps there is wisdom in the natural span we are allotted. I consider this as we walk, my gloved hand resting lightly on his arm, a point of contact we now share comfortably after months of gradual progression. Yet you don't begrudge me my unnatural extension? Never, he says with quiet certainty. Your transformation came at too high a cost, but I cannot regret the years it may grant you. Selfishly, I treasure the time it gives us to attempt to balance scales that can never truly be balanced. We have learned to speak of the past directly but carefully, acknowledging the permanent shadow it casts without allowing it to blot out all light. I've been thinking, I say as we approach the small lake at the edge of the property, about what to do with these extra years I've been granted. And what conclusion have you reached? Edward asks, genuine curiosity in his voice, that they should be used for more than mere existence, more than just our private atonement and reconciliation. I stop, turning to face him fully. I want to establish a research foundation in my father's name, dedicated to medical and scientific advancement, but governed by strict ethical principles. Interest kindles in his eyes. A worthy endeavor. What field would be its focus? Treatments for degenerative conditions, extensions of quality life rather than quantity. I've thought about this carefully over recent months. With my unique physiology, I could offer insights without revealing their source. And you... I hesitate, then continue more firmly. Your brilliant mind should not be wasted, Edward, despite its past application. He studies me with that penetrating gaze that once intimidated me, but now simply signifies his full attention. You would have me return to research? After everything? Redirected research, I clarify, guided by ethical considerations, overseen by others, aimed at alleviating suffering rather than cheating death. Your understanding of cellular regeneration could help countless people with palsy, consumption, even injuries previously considered permanently debilitating. He is silent for a long moment, processing this unexpected suggestion. You would trust me with this? I would trust us, I correct gently. Working together, checking each other, maintaining balance between scientific possibility and human dignity. Understanding dawns in his expression, not redemption. No, I agree. Nothing could provide that. But purpose, meaning, a way to ensure that the suffering that occurred in that laboratory eventually yields something of value to the world. Edward takes my hand, a gesture that has become precious in its hard-won naturalness. You continue to astonish me, Charlotte. Good, I reply with a small smile. I should hate to become predictable, even after decades together. His eyes widen slightly at this implication of a shared future, stretching far beyond the present moment. We have moved cautiously in rebuilding our relationship, making no declarations or promises beyond the immediate term. Decades, he repeats, a question in his voice. Yes, I say simply. If you wish it. I wish it more than anything, he responds, emotion making his voice rough. But I would never presume. It is not presumption when it is freely offered, I interrupt gently. We will never have a conventional marriage, Edward. The past ensures that. But we have built something real these past months, something honest, if complicated, something I treasure beyond words, he says quietly. I squeeze his hand, feeling the solid warmth of him through our gloves. As do I, against all expectation. We continue our walk as twilight deepens around Blackmoore Manor. The grand house no longer seems the mausoleum it once did, its windows glowing with welcoming light as dusk settles over the grounds. Within its walls we have created spaces of genuine connection amidst the shadows of the past. The library where we work together on foundation plans, the small parlor where we take private meals, and yes, in recent weeks, the shared bedchamber where we have cautiously, tenderly rediscovered each other as husband and wife. Our intimacy remains unlike anything I could have imagined, shaped by trauma yet transcending it, mindful of power yet equal in vulnerability, haunted by history yet stubbornly oriented toward the future. It is not the innocent passion of young lovers, but something more complex, more hard-won, and in its way, more profound. As night falls completely, we turn back toward the manor. Edward glances up at his balcony. The sight of my spectral visitations that now seem almost like a strange dream. Sometimes I still expect to see you there, he admits. The lady in black, watching through the glass. She's gone, I reply, following his gaze to the now empty balcony. Integrated back into me, but not forgotten. Never forgotten, he agrees solemnly. She saved us both, in her way. I consider this as we enter the warmth of Blackmoore Manor, servants greeting us respectfully, fires lit against the autumn chill. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps that ghostly version of myself, born of Edward's terrible experiment but sustained by my own will to exist, was necessary to bridge the gulf between the naive bride who first arrived at Blackmoore and the woman I have become. Later that night, as Edward sleeps beside me, I rise quietly and move to the window of our shared chamber. The moon is full, bathing the grounds in silver light, much as it did during those nights of my spectral wanderings. I press my palm against the cool glass, feeling its solid resistance against my flesh. Such a simple sensation, yet one I will never again take for granted. The lady in black no longer appears on the Duke's balcony. But sometimes, in quiet moments like this, I honor her memory. The part of me that refused to disappear, that haunted Edward until he recognized what he had done, that found her way back to life through the most impossible of journeys. I return to bed, settling carefully beside my husband, this complex, flawed, transformed man who destroyed me and then helped me rebuild myself anew. His breathing changes slightly as I slip beneath the covers, his arm instinctively reaching for me even in sleep. I allow the contact, no longer fearing it, but finding in it a hard-won comfort. "Charlotte?" he murmurs half awake. "I'm here," I assure him, my voice steady in the darkness. "Not on the balcony. Not anymore." He draws me closer, his warmth a welcome contrast to my perpetually cool skin. "Thank you," he whispers, the simple phrase carrying layers of meaning between us. I rest my head against his shoulder, listening to his heartbeat, normal, steady, human, while mine ticks on at half the pace, marking out the extended future that stretches before me. Before us, if we continue to navigate its complexities with the care and honesty we have cultivated these past months. The Duke of Blackmoore no longer sees a lady in black on his balcony each night. Instead, he wakes to find his wife beside him, white-haired and changed, but fully present in all her complicated humanity. It is not the happy ending of fairy tales. It is something messier, more difficult, and ultimately more real. A beginning rather than an ending, built on the ashes of what was destroyed, but reaching stubbornly toward what might yet be created. As sleep reclaims me, I reflect that perhaps this is the most unexpected discovery of all, that even from the darkest of experiences, life persists in its determination to forge meaning, connection, and, if not perfect happiness, then at least the quiet satisfaction of moving forward with hard-won wisdom and clear-eyed hope. The Lady in Black has fulfilled her purpose. Charlotte Blackmoore remains.